Hi, I'm Peter Knight. I want to talk this morning about 3 posture errors that I see virtually every day. May not see all of them every day, but I'll certainly see at least 2 of them. So if we have a look at these 3 common things and look to identify what we can do to actually get good posture. Now, the purpose of having good posture is so that each of the discs in your spine can rotate through their maximum range. Now, that's going to vary with age and from person to person a little bit, but what we want to do is optimize it. As players get older or through injury, there might be restrictions with the spine, but again, we can look to optimize what we have in order to be able to swing the club correctly. When the spine's set correctly, which is what posture is all about, it allows you to turn back and through freely, leads to a lot more consistency because there's likely to be less body movement, particularly upper body movement during the swing. So it's something that we want to get right as much as we can. When you first start standing more correctly, and we'll look at what's happening with the upper spine, you'll find that it might feel a little bit wooden when you're standing correctly, and that's just the muscles working. The spine will actually be able to rotate and move quite freely, but the muscles will actually be doing a little bit of work that they're probably not used to. And if you're a person who does spends a lot of time sitting, then the upper part of your back's likely to get a little bit stiff anyway, so this is going to be massively beneficial for your golf and probably for spinal health as well. So the first of them is that when we look from side on, and this is the one I'm guilty of too, when I set myself up, if my upper back particularly is rounded, so the shape of that movement is almost like the letter C. In fact, it's called a C posture. When I'm setting myself up, if I allow my shoulders to drop, then that's going to change my upper back. Now, it's quite likely at the same time, if you look at my belt line at the moment, it's quite horizontal, and when I lean forward to the golf ball with this rounded posture, you'll see that my belt line doesn't move very much, as opposed to if I tilted the hips, then as soon as I start to bend, my belt line changes. So a great practice drill, if you see this as you, is to stand with holding a club on your back. So now I've got the bottom of my back, bottom of the shaft, I should say, against my belt line, top against my head. So the shaft's sort of as closest to my body as I can get it. And I've also got contact around about the middle of my back, near my shoulder blades there. Now, when I tilt forward, I want to tilt forward without losing contact either at the bottom or the top or both. So when I tilt forward, I'm retaining contact with each of those 3 points. Now, once I've got the feel of that movement and I've tilted forward sort of 40, 45 degrees, then from there I'll look to retain that posture and come over to address the golf ball. So now I've got a tilt with my hips roughly 20 degrees down and my upper back's reasonably flat. Like I said, when you first do that, it will feel a little bit wooden for you, particularly if you have been rounded. So that's first one, and that little exercise is a ripper for doing that. The second one is the opposite with the hips. So when I set myself up, my belt buckle drops right down. So now my lower back is quite arched. Now, often a player, when they know they should feel like they're standing tall, will actually do that. They'll drop the front of the belt, and then the upper body is actually going to be too upright. And then they put the head down. Now, the shape of that movement is almost like the letter S. In fact, it's called S posture. So the first thing we can do is the same exercise that we did for that rounded posture, the C-shaped posture. The second is that if I tilt forward here and my belt line is tilted down, if I exaggerate that movement, so I'm dropping my belt buckle even further, I can feel an arching and a stress in my lower back. Now, if I go the other way and bring my belt buckle up, then I can feel that easing. So what I want to do is find middle ground so that my lower back is quite flat, or appears to be quite flat if I'm looking at my reflection. Now, when you do that, if you do that exercise where you're lifting your belt buckle or dropping your belt buckle, you may find as you're doing that the muscles around your back just shudder a little bit. They're not used to the movement. Don't worry, it's no problem. So from there, find that middle ground so that the lower back is quite flat. And then with that S posture, you're probably likely to need to tilt forward quite a bit further. So now you're organising your spine pretty much in three ways. The first is that you're flattening the lower back, so you're not dropping that belt line too much. The second is you've got an overall more forward tilt. And the third is that your back is flat, exactly the same as you saw with the first one. Now, when you first go about getting your spine organised like that, you'll find that it feels like you're doing all sorts of weird movements with your spine and it's sort of tricky to get right. That's just because your body's not used to it. Like I said at the start, it will allow your spine to move much, much more freely as you get used to it. It's certainly easier. It is easier to do that with the supervision of a coach, because a coach will be able to guide you through that, and then as you're practicing to be able to get that posture each time. And you'll find that over the period of a lesson, whether that's 30 minutes or 60 minutes, it's going to become easier to get into that position. You'll do it more quickly and you'll do it more freely. And you should notice a change with your golf shots as well. Now, the third thing, looking from front on, I see so many players when they set themselves up, the right hip or trailing hip is a little bit higher than the leading hip. So ideally at address, your hip level is going to be level. So when you set yourself up, if anything, if the left hip is a tiny bit higher than the right, then that's fine. And we're only talking a couple of degrees, but a couple of degrees can make a significant difference. And the reason why it's beneficial to have the hips level or left hip even a tiny bit higher is because at address we want the upper body to lean away from the target. So we want the spine relatively straight and just leaning slightly away from the target. If my right hip is higher than my left and I'm trying to lean away, then my spine gets this big curve in it, particularly if you're sort of looking from behind. And it also feels quite awkward and feels like I'm a bit crunched up in the right side here. So if you have that sensation, then this particular part could be something that you can check. So when I set myself up, my feeling is left hip's a tiny bit higher than the right, my upper body's leaning slightly away from the target, and when I set myself up, the lean that I've got is only minimal, maybe about 10 degrees. Now, a really good check for you is that from front on, if I take a line from my golf ball, a vertical line, I've got the ball, my hands, and the left side of my face. So if the middle of my face or right side of my face is set up, as you can see from there, my upper body's out of position. It's leaning toward the target. Upper body leans slightly away, left hip feels slightly higher, and then looking from side on, again, I've got that nice posture. So I'm ready to go. Practice having a look at how you're standing, both from this view and also from this view. Double check your posture, work through it yourself if you can, but if not, then definitely get some supervision from a qualified professional coach who'll be able to help you with that. And you'll find that it is going to make hitting the ball consistently and hitting it well much easier.